Good morning, students. My name is Eliza and I'm going to be giving you your lesson for this week's distance learning. I'm supposed to press a button, was it? Give me a moment. How fun that is. That's so fun. Alright, so Miss Bonner asked me to step in this week and to give you guys your lesson because she was busy sleeping or some nonsense. She said she was very tired. So let's dive right in. This week we're going to be wrapping up the civil rights movement as well as the women's suffrage movement with a text called The History and Process of Voting. It will take you all the way back to the beginning where wealthy landowners were the only ones that could vote up to the present time where you can vote when you're of age. On Tuesday, you will be having a POD response. Now remember, there's going to be multiple questions. I want to remind you, as Miss Bonner has asked me to, that you need to answer each of these questions and answer them in a complete sentence, in a complete sentence, in a complete sentence, in a complete sentence, just as if you would if you were in school. Wednesday, we're going to start some new content and we're going to analyze two presidents and some statements they made to the public. The first president that we're going to be looking at is Richard Nixon. Now, Richard Nixon was not elected to be president until 1969, but it is important that we read this text out of order. What you need to know, before Nixon became president, in that decade, we had the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the assassination of JFK, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we had men who landed on the moon. So there was a lot happening in the 60s, and that was a lot for President Nixon to step into. I want you to especially remember that Nixon became president after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. We will be looking more closely at his assassination next week. Then Thursday, we're going to be examining a different president, President Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan became president in the 80s, and the 80s came with their own issues entirely. Communism and the Cold War ended. Now, the Cold War was a war between nations that never actually happened. It was more of an arms race and threats between nations. There was a lot of tension and a lot of worry during this time. The 80s was also when the Berlin Wall came down, and if you want to do a little Google search about the Berlin Wall, I would love to hear what you've learned about it. That's really what we're looking at next week. Now, what I want you to try and discover this week is why we would be looking at President Reagan along with President Nixon. What do these two presidents have in common, and what are they discussing that may relate to one another? I did not just choose these two texts because they were convenient. I chose them because they go together for some reason. I want you to figure out why I put them together. That may be something that you will have featured in your forum question. That's all I have for you this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on Thursday. Civil rights movement as well as the women's suffrage to present time when you can vote in your I'm sucking today. Are we going to begin to discuss it was also the 80s was